The crowd gathered outside Mama Blessing's shop, whispering and pointing at Dapo's bandaged hands. Nobody in Abaji village knew that these callous fingers had just signed a 2.3 billion naira contract in Dubai last week. Dapo simply smiled and continued sanding the wooden table he was repairing for the old woman, remembering his grandfather's words, "Let them talk." A man's worth isn't measured by their words, but by the work of his hands. 3 months earlier, 32-year-old Dapo Ademola had returned to his childhood village of Abaji, just outside Abuja, after 15 years abroad and building a successful tech company. He could have lived anywhere. Instead, he chose to come home dressed in old jeans and t-shirts, renting a small house on the outskirts of the village where the red dust of the harmattan settled on his windowsills each morning. His return hadn't been entirely smooth. The first week, he'd gotten into an argument with a commercial bus driver who recognized him from a tech magazine, but couldn't believe the big man was actually living in the village. Dapo had to pretend it was a case of mistaken identity, even as his heart raced with the fear of his cover being blown. "You need a wife," his mother had told him during their weekly phone calls. "All that money won't keep you warm at night." She was staying in London with his younger sister, who was completing her medical residency. They thought he was crazy for returning to the village, but they didn't understand his exhaustion with the superficial world he'd been living in. The last straw had been Sandra, his ex-fiancée in London. She'd been perfect, kind, intelligent, ambitious until she discovered his real net worth. Overnight, their simple dinner dates turned into appearances at exclusive restaurants. She began planning a wedding that looked more like a society event than a celebration of love. When he suggested a smaller ceremony, she looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Darling," she'd said, "people expect certain things from someone of your status." That was when Dapo realized he'd never know if she'd loved him or the lifestyle he could provide. The engagement ended a week later. In Abaji, he took up his grandfather's old carpentry tools, stored away in his uncle's house for decades. The same tools that had put Dapo through school before his tech innovations made him wealthy. His education in engineering made the work easy, and he found peace in the rhythmic motion of sanding wood, the precise measurements, and the satisfaction of creating something tangible. The village had changed since his childhood. Solar panels now dotted some roofs, and most young people had smartphones. But the essence remained the same: the morning calls of the roosters, the smell of burning firewood, the greetings of good morning and how are you exchanged between neighbors. Then he met Ayomide. She taught at the village secondary school and spent her evenings helping her aunt run a small bookshop. The first time Dapo saw her, she was reading to a group of children outside the shop, her voice bringing the story to life with different characters and sounds. The book was well worn, its pages held together with tape, but the children were entranced. "You're new here," she said when she noticed him watching. "I'm Ayomide. Dapo. I do carpentry work." She smiled, and something in his chest tightened. "We need some shelves fixed in the shop. Would you have time?" The bookshop became his sanctuary. Between fixing shelves and repairing tables, he learned about Ayomide's life. She'd studied literature at Ahmadu Bello University, and despite offers to teach in bigger cities, she'd chosen to return to Abaji. Like him, she believed in the power of returning home, of building something meaningful where your roots were. "My father used to say that true change starts at home," she told him one evening as they sat outside the shop. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, and somewhere in the distance, the sounds of evening prayers floated through the air. "Everyone wants to run to Lagos or Abuja, but who will stay to build our villages?" Dapo understood perfectly. It was the same reason he'd chosen to come back, though he couldn't tell her that yet. Their friendship deepened over cups of zobo drink and conversations about everything from village politics to their dreams for the future. Ayomide told him about losing her father, a respected carpenter, when she was young. Dapo shared stories about his grandfather teaching him woodwork, carefully omitting the parts about his later success. "Education changed my life," she said one day. showing him a notebook filled with names of children who borrowed books. But many children here can't afford books. I use my teacher's salary to buy what I can, but it's never enough. The struggle was visible in the patched-up books and shared copies. Dapo's fingers itched to write a check that would fund not just a library, but an entire educational center. Instead, he asked, "What if we organized a fundraiser?" The idea took root in the community. Market women promised to cook jollof rice and pounded yam to sell. Young men offered to set up chairs and canopies. Dapo's workshop became a hub of activity as he taught some of the older students how to make simple wooden toys for sale. But not everyone supported their efforts. Chief Adekunle's son, Tun, had been pursuing Ayomide for months. He drove a Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon and never failed to mention his father's connections in Abuja. Each time he visited the bookshop, he made sure to remind everyone within earshot about his latest business venture or his new property in the capital. Why waste time with a carpenter when you could have so much more? Dapo overheard Tun asking Ayomide one day, "I could build you a proper bookshop, not this small room." "Money isn't everything," Ayomide replied, her voice firm. "Dapo has something more valuable, a kind heart. And this small room has helped more children discover the joy of reading than all your big promises." The interaction left Dapo both proud and ashamed. Proud of Ayomide's integrity, but ashamed of his own deception. Every day, it became harder to maintain the lie, especially as his feelings for her grew stronger. The fundraiser was scheduled for Saturday. On Friday evening, as Dapo worked late to finish the last batch of toys, Tun appeared at his workshop. The air was thick with dust and unsaid words. "I know who you are," Tun said, holding up his phone with a news article about Afritech Solutions. "Does Ayomide know she's falling for a billionaire pretending to be poorer?" Dapo set down his tools, his mind racing. How much to keep quiet? Tun named his price 50 million naira. Instead of reaching for his phone to make a transfer, Dapo stood up, feeling the weight of his grandfather's lessons in his heart. "Tell everyone," he said quietly. "But know this, I chose carpentry because it reminds me of my grandfather who raised me after my father died. He taught me that true wealth isn't in your pocket, but in how many lives you touch. I wanted to find someone who understood that." "You're a fool," Tun spat. "You could have anything you want and you choose to play poor." "I have everything I need," Dapo replied. "The question is, with all your money and connections, do you..." The next morning, Dapo arrived at the fundraiser to find the entire village buzzing with Tun's revelation. Children pointed and whispered. Adults who had been friendly yesterday now bowed slightly when he passed. But Ayomide wasn't there. He found her at the bookshop, surrounded by boxes of brand new books. The morning light streaming through the window caught the dust motes dancing in the air, making them look like golden particles suspended in time. "These arrived this morning," she said without looking at him. "Apparently, an anonymous donor decided our shop deserved a full library upgrade. The delivery man also brought this." She held up a familiar-looking business card, his business card, embossed with the Afritech Solutions logo. "Ayomide, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you're actually rich? That this was some kind of test?" Her voice trembled. "Do you know how many nights I stayed awake, worried that I was falling for someone who might struggle to make ends meet? I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that what I felt for you was real." "It is real," Dapo said, taking a step toward her. "Everything except my bank balance was true. I needed to know if someone could love me without the money, without the status. In London, I was engaged to someone who changed completely when she discovered my wealth. I couldn't go through that again. But that's just it, Dapo. You didn't trust me enough to make that choice for myself. You made it for me. How is that any different from Tun trying to impress me with his car and connections? You both decided what should matter to me." The silence between them felt heavier than all the wooden furniture Dapo had ever made. Outside, they could hear the fundraiser beginning, the sound of children laughing and music playing. My father was a carpenter too. Did you know that? Ayomide finally spoke again. He died when I was young, but I remember the smell of wood shavings, the pride he took in creating beautiful things with his hands. When I saw you working, it reminded me of him. That's why I started falling for you. Not because you were poor or rich, but because you seemed real. Dapo walked to his workbench and picked up a small wooden box he'd been saving. The wood was smooth as silk from countless hours of sanding. Inside was a carved book, opening to reveal a ring he'd designed himself, with patterns inspired by traditional Yoruba art. "I am real," he said. "The money, the company, that's just what I do. But this," he ran his fingers over the carved book, "this is who I am. A man who loves working with his hands, who finds peace in creating things, who fell in love with a teacher who reads stories to children and dreams of giving them a better future." Ayomide took the box, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns he'd carved. "You made this?" "Every night after you'd leave the shop. I know I should have told you the truth sooner, but I promise you this whether you can forgive me or not. Those books aren't an anonymous donation. They're an investment in your dream, in the children's future. No strings attached." Ayomide looked at him for a long moment, and he could see the battle in her eyes: trust versus betrayal, love versus hurt. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. "You know what's funny? I was going to tell you today that the school offered me a position as headmistress. I was worried about taking it because I thought you might feel intimidated by me earning more than a carpenter." Now it was Dapo's turn to laugh. They stood there, surrounded by books and the smell of fresh wood, their laughter mixing with the sounds of the village outside. "So," Dapo said finally, "what happens now?" Ayomide picked up a children's book from one of the boxes. "Now you're going to help me shelve these books. Then you're going to teach me how to use those carpentry tools properly. And then," she smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger, "then we're going to build something beautiful together." "Together," Dapo agreed, pulling her close. No more secrets. The fundraiser outside turned into a celebration when they emerged from the bookshop hand in hand. Chief Adekunle himself came to offer his blessing, though his son was notably absent. Mama Blessing insisted on preparing a feast, and the children begged for more stories. In the months that followed, Dapo and Ayomide's dreams grew bigger than just a library. They established a learning center that combined traditional crafts with modern education. Students could learn coding on donated computers in one room, while learning woodworking and other practical skills in another. The center became a model for other villages, proving that progress didn't have to mean losing touch with tradition. Dapo still spent his mornings in his workshop, finding peace in the simple act of creating. Sometimes Ayomide would join him, her hands growing callous from learning to work with wood. In the afternoons, she ran the school with the same passion she'd shown in the small bookshop, now reaching more children than ever before. Their wedding was a blend of old and new, a traditional ceremony in the village, followed by a modern celebration. Sandra sent her congratulations from London, and Dapo realized he felt nothing but gratitude for the path that had led him here. And if you visit Abaji today, you might find a successful tech entrepreneur still fixing furniture in his workshop, while his wife reads stories to a new generation of dreamers. Their center has become a beacon of hope, proving that true wealth isn't just about money in the bank, but about the lives you touch and the legacy you build. Because sometimes the most valuable things in life aren't the ones that come with a price tag, but the ones you build with your own hands and heart. And in the end, it wasn't about a rich man pretending to be poor. It was about a man finding his way back to what really mattered, and a woman who helped him understand that authenticity is the greatest wealth of all.